I always like my coffee. Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming in. I'm going to turn this wee light out. Bear with me a wee second because I've got a big light on.
You're disappearing. You went a bit headless then.
I know. You can go. That's a good thing about this. See that? My hand just magically appeared. You know, it just. Anyway. 27 seconds in, we're talking crap already. You know, that's good. Evening, folks. Thanks for coming back. So tonight we have this young lady with us. You'll probably recognise her. My Tudor co-host and her daughter's tarot teacher, TT, tarot instructor, tutor, whatever you want to call it.
She's my apprentice.
I'm going to start again. Tarot Tracey. You put me off when we just started. There's a short chat out. There's a short
Who's
chat
that?
out.
Hello, Craig. I've got to go like that because the screen's so tiny. I have to go right up to look to see who it is. Hello, kiddos. Hi, Craig.
You'll no need to do that with Craig. Craig's 6'5". I always get it mixed up. He's between 6'5" and 6'7". That's Laura's other half.
I call him the tall man.
Laura's with the hat. And there's Mel. That's Laura's daughter. She's in.
Oh, hi, Mel.
Aye. Peter Pillsbury.
Oh, hi, Pete. I know Pete. He's the record guy. He collects LPs, bless him.
That was a great age. I was actually looking at it. I know this is about the Tudors, but we'll get to that. Don't worry. Craig's 6'6".
6'6", blimey.
As you know, I'm a big Elvis fan. And there's a lot on TikTok about Elvis and stuff. And there's Craig's other half. Evening, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
And I was actually looking. There's a few women and guys on TikTok, and one of them collects Elvis LPs.
Right.
So I was looking at a channel earlier on, and I was thinking about. I used to have a whack load of LPs, you know, because back then that's all you could buy. This is before the CD era, shall we say?
Yeah.
And there's Mrs. Matthewson in. I get pulled up the other week there for calling her the wife. Eileen for Phantom Seekers was on with Liam for Highland. And I says, well, there's the wife in. And Eileen pulled me up on the show for calling her the wife. So I need to say Mrs. Matthewson. So I was watching this, and you know, she's got all her albums up on her wall and stuff, and I was looking at them. I thought I used to have that one, and it takes you back when you see the album covers, you know.
Yeah, it really
the ones
does.
you used to have.
Yeah.
But anyway, on with the show. So Tracey, as you know, she's my kind of Tudor co-host, and was Craig saying I had a load of last. Gave up half of them when CDs came out. Still have a few.
Me too, Craig.
Aye. So anyone's been watching us will know that we've been going through the Tudor era. You know, we talked about Henry, we talked about Six Wives, and then we went on to the LPs. I had loads of LPs. And then we started talking about the people behind the scenes, the Privy Council, Wolseley and what have you. Tonight we're going to be chatting about, excuse me, the death of Henry and the kind of impact that it had on the country and who came next, basically after him.
Yeah.
So anything you want to add? Tracey,
well, no. We'll
step in anytime.
Yeah, I will step in for you, sir. I will step in. So yes, as Scott said, we've had a whole series of these, and I don't know whether on your YouTube channel, Scott, you can put them in some sort of order. I don't know if there's a possibility of doing that, but we've been doing them probably for well over a year now, haven't we? So they're kind of scattered around, but we've kind of worked our way through the Tudor history, starting with sort of Henry's parents, and then working our way through, as Scott said. And then basically we're now going to talk about, as we say, Henry towards the end of his life, what happened when he passed. So Henry VIII, he really reshaped England, didn't he, by cutting ties with the Roman Catholic Church. He went through the whole rigmarole of divorcing Catherine of Aragon, which caused great religious upset, great political upset. He was instrumental in establishing himself the monarch of the supreme head of the Church of England. So they broke away from the Catholic Church totally. Known as
sorry, Susie,
Hi,
Rigger. He calls me Big Cheese. I don't think it's a kind of pet name. He's from Glasgow as well. He's from a bad bit of Glasgow, but Penny Lee. If you're in Glasgow, don't get Penny Lee.
Oh well, we'll let him off. We'll let him off.
I'm for the good bit of Glasgow. You know what I mean? As you were saying, carry on. Sorry though.
No, that's quite right. So he established himself as the monarch, the supreme head of the Church of England. So he actually totally broke away from the Catholic Church. And as we know, that caused a huge upset known as the Reformation. And that happened between 1532 and 1534. But in the final decade of his life, he suffered from chronic illness. As we know, he had severe leg ulcers that left him very immobile, and he depended on others more and more. And there's a possibility that he probably, as well as his leg ulcers and his, what you laughing at? he likely had.
You're saying I'm from the cheese factory. Just think that he's fine. He's harmless, really. Rigger was actually my best man at our wedding.
I've seen Rigger actually because he's been on your show, hasn't he? So I've watched the shows. He's been on, so.
The big ugly guy with black hair, but we'll not go there, you know.
So anyway, back to poor old Henry VIII. So in his final 10 years of his life, he did suffer greatly. He was very ill. He had terrible leg ulcers that we've mentioned in previous ones, haven't we? That were, they used to dress them and do all sorts of things that medically wouldn't do now because it would have just made them so much worse. He just depended more and more on others. Nowadays, we would be able to diagnose somebody if they had diabetes or if they had heart failure, which is what he was likely to have had. But obviously that wouldn't have been known about back in those days. It wouldn't have been diagnosed. So he had no end of problems, medical issues, medical problems. And then by the mid-1540s, he could no longer walk unaided. He required hoisting equipment. He used a mechanical stamp to sign documents. I mean, it must have been really frustrating for somebody who'd been in power for so long to be able to, to be losing his faculties, his physical faculties, even if his mind was still very much able. His eyesight was deteriorating. He had really, he became very physically weak. In the last years of his life, Henry VIII handed over much of his sort of governance to his advisors. And as we know, he lost a lot of them close to him at his own hands, really. A lot of them were beheaded, weren't they? And had there was a lot of... Yeah.
You keep freezing. Thomas More Cromwell as well, who were two of his closest advisors who he had beheaded for treason. And then, of course, we know about Cardinal Wolsey, although mystery kind of still surrounds how Wolsey actually passed. Some say it was suicide, some say it was illness. I've even heard theories that he was actually, when he was imprisoned, that he was actually murdered in his cell on Henry's orders. But it's one of these stories that you're never going to find out. But
we'll never truly know, will we?
No, I think everything, because let's face it, Henry was never meant to be king.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
It was by default,
meant to be Arthur.
Absolutely.
And then obviously when Arthur passed away, when Arthur was about 15, he died suddenly, and then all of a sudden Henry was kind of shoved into the limelight. And he became king when he was 18. He was crowned in 1509. And he was just a young boy, basically. Yeah.
Although he was classed as quite brutal, and a lot of it was at his direction, wasn't it? I think he did. We said before, he had a very hard life. It was never easy for him. There was always political unrest. He had all of the issues with his wives. People were whispering in his ear, "Oh, you need to get rid of this one. She's against you. You need to, And it was. He had this his whole life. So he's probably the most talked about monarch in history, isn't he, for everything that happened and everything that he achieved, everything that he did, good and bad. And he really was England's sort of most influential and controversial monarchs of all time. And he died on the 28th of January, 1547, aged 55, which was quite a good age back then. wasn't it? You know,
It was.
55 was a decent age, although to us now, because we're both past that, we're not actually, we're going backwards, we've decided. That is, to now, in this day and age, in your 50s, you're quite young, aren't you? But back then it was a really good age. So
that's it. I mean, it's, you know, the life expectancy back then was very, very low. And, you know, even if you compare it, I mean, it's, you know, it's a good few years on to Henry, but like say, you know, take Pendle, you know, in the 1612, the average life expectancy was between 25 and 30. And this is one of the reasons that Elizabeth Dendyke was accused of witchcraft, because she was 83 or 85. So as far as I was concerned, you know, she had made a pact with the devil to live a long life. So, you know, 55 back in the 1500s was quite a good innings, as they would say.
Yeah.
You know, and then really, as you were saying, you know, about his illnesses after his jousting accident, 1536. I don't think he was ever right after that.
No, because he had a head injury, didn't he? And they say that head injuries change people. And back then, again, they probably didn't realise that. Medically now, we know that does change people, doesn't it, if you have a serious head injury? So he had that to contend with. Then he had his declining health with his leg ulcers that gave him so many problems, even when he was still quite young. And then everything else, you know, he gained a massive amount of weight, as we know, which then gave him diabetes and heart failure, which, like we said, they wouldn't have diagnosed that back in that day. But he would have had all of these ailments, and also losing his eyesight. That was probably connected to the diabetes as well, wasn't it? Because that is one of the side effects. So, yeah, the poor chap didn't have an easy life, and he didn't have an easy death, really, because I think it was very long and drawn out with all of the ailments that he had. So, yes, sadly, he died on 28th of January, 1547 at the Palace of Whitehall. And his body was embalmed. And actually, to embalm him, because they used cloth coverings and they used wax, apparently, they had to remove organs from his body. I don't know if you know about that, Scott, but they actually took organs out.
No, I didn't know. I mean,
so that they could properly embalm him and make him look, you know, he always was very vain, always wanted to be portrayed as being thin in portraits, even when he wasn't. And I think even in death, that was instructions for him to look as healthy or as good as he could, even when he was dead. So they removed organs, they covered him with cloths, they covered him with wax, they embalmed his body. His coffin weighed 1/2 ton. I mean, imagine that. It was lead lined and it weighed 1/2 ton. And there was a very long, very elaborate funeral procession. There was an effigy of King Henry VIII on his actual coffin, which I think was made out of wood and made out of wax. So it was a really big affair, and the sort of funeral procession went on for miles and miles. And eventually his body was interred in St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, beside his beloved wife, Jane Seymour, his one true love, who had produced the only male heir. So it was very fitting for him to be buried with his wife at Windsor Castle. And apparently he had grand designs for his own burial, which never got.
That's what I was just going to say.
They never got put into practice.
I've got a question to Peter, which I'll stick up in a wee second. I designed his own tomb, but it was never completed.
No.
Which I think, you know, kind of shows that his death was maybe, all right, back then it was treason to even imagine the death of the king.
Exactly. Couldn't be talked about it, could it?
Because I mean, that's one of the reasons for, you know, why Anne Boleyn was her downfall, because of what she said to Henry Norris, you know, about he wants to wear dead man's shoes. So it was treason. So nobody, even though everybody probably expected Henry to pass, they were probably surprised when he passed. But I want to jump back to the cause of his death, because I read that he, you know, at first they thought he died of syphilis. But then there's a historian, Susan McLean Kybert. She went down the theory that he actually died of scurvy.
Okay. Wow.
She said, you know, there's meant to be quite a few things about his health that point towards him dying of scurvy. But, you know, we don't know, you know, as you say, it's hard because, let's face it, he was a big, big man.
Yeah.
You know, as you said. And so maybe his heart
absolutely.
just did pack in. But there's all different theories. I mean, this lady Susan, she's saying,
Yeah,
no,
and if you had
was
undiagnosed
scurvy.
diabetes,
I could have been in a
okay.
diabetic coma or, you know, whatever. I think it's
Exactly.
something we'll never, ever find out for sure. You know, Pierre's asking, if Donald Trump lived during Henry's reign, do you think he would have been, or if Donald lived during Henry's, do you think he would have been beheaded due to his mouth getting him in trouble?
Oh, goodness, without a shadow of a doubt, he would have been the first one to go. Don't you think?
I think, well, I don't know, I'm 50-50 because, you know, I don't know a lot about Trump. I know he was in Home Alone. You know, but he is quite outspoken. But I think back then, even if you had that kind of attitude that you were outspoken, you kept yourself to yourself. You know, you kept your opinions to yourself.
Yeah.
Because you basically, you couldn't, we've spoken about this before, Tracy, being in the Privy Council, you couldn't trust anybody.
No.
You know, because they were all trying to climb out each other to gain favour with Henry. So I think if Trump had been alive, then he would definitely have lost his head if he opened his mouth. But I think he would have maybe kept stum.
Yeah,
just
maybe he would have been a bit more.
I might be wrong.
He might have been a bit more diplomatic. You never know. Who knows?
Diplomatic with the truth. But I mean, Henry designed his own tomb, which was never finished.
Exactly. So it was a very, very humble and simple tomb. But the key thing is, out of all of his wives, he was buried with Jane Seymour, because that was the lady that he truly loved. She gave him his only male heir, so he wanted to be laid to rest next to her. So I think that's really quite fitting, and that gives a lovely love story, or a true love story of Henry VIII, doesn't it, in Jane Seymour? And actually, following. Sorry.
No, go on. It's fine. Go on.
So I was just going to say, so following Henry's death, he actually left his 9-year-old son, Edward VI. So Edward VI was the son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour, their only male child. And he was basically 9 years old and immediately became king. And he faced a really precarious succession, because largely created by Henry, because of all of the marital, the political, the religious upsets that he had caused. So this young king, who had no experience, no life experience, no knowledge, was left at the helm. He was the monarch. So he was born in 1537, and he became king at the age of 9. A very short coronation took place, because they were very aware that he's a young child and he couldn't go through a long ceremony. So a very short coronation took place on the 20th of Feb in 1547, so sometime after Henry had died. But a regency council was appointed alongside the child, because basically the king was a child. So this included Thomas Cranmer, who was Archbishop of Canterbury, and he'd had a huge impact with Henry, helping him to break away from the Catholic Church. So he was a really, really important person. Though the real power gravitated, should I say, towards Edward Seymour. So Edward Seymour was the Duke of Somerset, and he was also the late Jane Seymour's brother. And he was very sort of power hungry. He was really driven. So he announced himself as Lord Protector. So he was Edward VI. So Henry VIII's son, Edward. It's very confusing because there's two Edwards. But Edward VI, his son, Edward Seymour, was his uncle. Okay, so the Lord Protector was the king's uncle, and the late Jane Seymour's brother. So in 1547, Seymour tried to push England further towards Protestant direction. So they were trying to get rid of all of the Catholics, totally get rid of the Catholic religion altogether, because it hadn't quite been done. But during his reign, he faced rebellions, both religious, financial and governmental. All of these people were rebelling against him. They didn't approve of him. He was seen as weak, and he was eventually overthrown by his rival and powerful nobleman, John Dudley. So he was removed as Lord Protector in 1549. So he was only in power really for a couple of years to support the young king, but he was never very popular. Never very popular at all.
Can you imagine how, I mean, young Edward, he was the first ever English monarch to be raised as Protestant. You know, obviously,
Yeah.
Henry's father were all raised Catholic, you know. But young Edward, he was the first ever to be actually raised as a Protestant. But just getting back, you know, after Henry died, he did so much in his, because he reigned for like 38 years. Pardon me. And as you say, he left so much in his wake. And all of a sudden, you've got this 9-year-old child, basically, who's no lived.
Crazy.
You know, I mean, let's face it, 9 years, nothing. And he's suddenly the King of England, you know, and he's got all these adults ordering about him, telling him what he should be doing, what he should be saying, and they're all making his decisions for him.
Exactly.
You know?
Well, he wouldn't have been old enough or wise enough to do it without their support, would he? You know, that was the thing.
It must have been terrified for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Awful. Absolutely awful. So John Dudley, this nobleman who was on the scene, well, sorry, hang on, where did we get to? So, so basically Edward Seymour was the Lord Protector, and then John Dudley sort of took over and he removed him as Lord Protector in 1549, and then he was later accused of plotting against Dudley and was arrested and executed in January 1552 by beheading at Tower Hill, basically. So John Dudley removed him and then accused him of plotting against him because he just wanted him off the scene. He didn't want any Seymours on the scene whatsoever. So he just basically accused him of treason, and another one lost their head at Tower Hill. How many is that?
Let's face it, it was the easiest way to get rid of a rival, really, wasn't it? Just accuse him of treason, drum up some evidence, you know, fake evidence, and off to Tower Hill they go.
Yeah, I know, which is so tragic because so many of them went that way, didn't they? Even after Henry VIII had passed, even after he died, even after Henry VIII had died, they still kept the beheading going. It was still an horrendous time. It really was. So in 1549, John Dudley, who was a very powerful nobleman and he was a very skilled politician, he was very canny actually, because instead of becoming Lord Protector, which he knew wouldn't be popular, he ruled much more carefully. So he almost kept a low profile and let other people have a voice so that he wasn't dominant. So he tried to sort of protect his position, but he was still quite dominant in government. You know, he was very intelligent, he knew his stuff, but he was very canny about how he did it. He didn't go in there demanding to be the Lord Protector. He went in there and kind of gave everybody a fair voice to keep his own position safe, basically. So over time, he sort of repaired what Thomas Seymour had destroyed. So he improved the government, he improved finances, there weren't any rebellions. It was a much more peaceful and a much more calm time whilst he was in, you know, basically ruling. So he was quite a good guy to have. But the young Edward VI, so Henry VIII's son, he became seriously ill in 1553. And at just aged 15, he tragically died. Now, if you remember, when he was born, Henry VIII was so protective of him. He kept him locked away. He was locked away with a nanny, and he was protected from any illnesses. So, of course, he didn't have anything to fight against. He hadn't built up any sort of immunity. So he was a very ill, very sickly child. And sadly,
sorry, Tracy, can you hear a dog barking?
I can, but I think that might be in my street somewhere.
No, I'm listening to what you're saying, but I keep thinking I can hear it, you know. a dog barking, so you can hear it, that's fine. As long as it's not me, that's fine.
There is a dog in the distance. I can hear him.
That's fine. Sorry, dog, carry.
It's not Bertie because he's not here today, bless him. He's at mum's today. So it's not my dog. So he sadly died at just 15, which is really tragic because Henry VIII had died and now his only son had died. But Robert Dudley was really keen to try and keep control, and he wanted to strongly keep everything Protestant. And he supported putting Lady Jane Grey on the throne instead of Mary. So Mary the First obviously was Edward VI's half sister, the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. She was in the background, and they were very, very keen not to let her take the throne. So John Dudley supported Lady Jane Grey marrying Edward VI before he died. And that was Edward VI's cousin, basically, to try and strengthen his control, wanted to keep her there. But this very quickly collapsed. This plan collapsed because Mary I was gaining more and more power. She was gaining more and more supporters. And surprise, surprise, Dudley was arrested and eventually charged with treason. And he was executed in August 1553 by beheading at Tower Hill.
I think
another one off the head.
I think treason was quite popular back then, don't you think?
I think
treason seemed to be the in thing back then.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It really was.
And as you say, you got Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day queen.
This is it. On the 10th of July in 1553, Lady Jane Grey was proclaimed queen, and she reigned for 9 days, as you said. She before Mary I gathered her forces yet again, and she was then held for treason, and she was held in the Tower for quite some time, and then she was executed on the 12th of February 1554, and she was only aged 16 or 17. She was so young, and it's so sad because Lady Jane Grey was an innocent pawn in a political game, wasn't she, when you think about it?
And that's what I was going to say, you know, so she was executed for nothing, basically.
Yeah, terrible
the road.
Loss of life.
You know, rather than send her away, whatever, they decide just to execute her. But I can't mind that she was executed within the Tower or outside the Tower.
Because she was. Yeah, she was.
She was executed inside the Tower.
She was. And apparently she was very calm. She accepted her fate. And she spoke words that were very calming. And she just accepted that this was the fate and this was what was going to happen to her. But I mean, that's such a tragedy, isn't it? Because of her age, 16 or 17, she didn't want to be queen. She didn't want to marry the late king, which was the young lad that had died. She didn't want any of that. It was all orchestrated for her because people just wanted to stay in power. They were that desperate that they used other people, to sort of stay in power. So she's quite famous, isn't she, Lady Jane Grey, for being the queen for the shortest amount of time?
She's quite famous as the 9-day queen. And as you say, she didn't want to be queen. She didn't want to be married.
No.
I think basically she just wanted a quiet life. But, the powers that be decided otherwise. And she was just another pawn. So that, Lady Jane, she lost her head, so she's gone. So then
she's gone.
Mary steps in.
Young Edward has died. Mary I, so this is Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII's first daughter. So she became queen in July 1553 after overthrowing Lady Jane Grey. And she really ruled with an iron fist because she had a lot of vengeance again, for what happened to her mother. Her mother was Catholic. Henry VIII, as we know, divorced her. They had the Reformation. Her mother basically died of heartache. She was stripped of everything. She was stripped of her marriage. She was sent away. Eventually, Henry took all of her friends away, all of her servants away. And, she died. And they say that she possibly died of a broken heart, possibly cancer. But, a lot of them do say that it was a broken heart. So Mary, her daughter, was, really keen to bring Catholicism back. and apparently she was responsible for over 300 people being burnt at the stake.
Because Mary, and don't forget, even Henry himself, he said to have threatened his own daughter with execution if she wouldn't sign the oath, which she later backtracked on. But, Mary had a few scores to settle. As you say,
she did.
She was a very, very devout Catholic, and she was more or less powerless during her father's reign. The cheating of her mother, and then the death of her father that really didn't want her.
Yeah, I know. And she was sent away from court. She was sent away from court, wasn't she?
She was banished from court, and I think eventually she was brought back, but I think that was so Henry could just save face. But so I mean, you've got that, the treatment of her mother, the I don't know, the father didn't want her, but unwanted daughter basically, and then she's watched, her brother, her half brother, become king and die, and then she's watched this Lady Jane Grey, take over the hot seat, even though it was just for 9 days. And so she's been sitting in the background all this time. And then all of a sudden, Mary's in charge. She's queen, and she's going to go to town, which she did.
She wanted to be queen because she felt that was her right. She was the first child, so she always wanted to be queen, and she wanted to avenge her mother's death. She was quite brutal, known as Bloody Mary, as we know. And she has a drink named after her as well, doesn't she, Bloody Mary? But allegedly she burnt over 300 people at the stake. One of those was Thomas Cranmer, who we mentioned at the beginning, who was Archbishop of Canterbury. So he had a big part to play in Henry VIII breaking away from the Catholic Church. He also helped Henry divorce Catherine of Aragon. So she particularly wanted to get rid of Thomas Cranmer. So he was kind of one of the first on her list. And he was burnt at the stake in Oxford, actually. And I've seen the plaque for that. There's a street called Broad Street in Oxford. I used to work in there, and they've got plaques with crosses on where the martyrs, they're called martyrs now, were burnt, because she also burnt Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley. Now, they were both bishops at the time. They weren't connected to the council at all. They weren't in the King's Court, but they were, high up in the church, and she was keen to get rid of them. So there are 3 martyrs that were burnt in Oxford, and we have a martyrs memorial there. I don't know if anybody watching has ever been to Oxford, but you will see them. You will see the martyrs memorial, and you can see the crosses in the ground. So it's quite interesting. There's a bit of a connection to me there because I'm from Oxfordshire. Oxford's not far up the road from me. And as I said, she was known as Bloody Mary. She really ruled with an iron fist. But she did have a lot of supporters, and she stayed on the throne really until she became ill, until she died. And when she died, I don't want to go too much into it because I know that we'll talk about that. Obviously, we'll do another session about Mary because there's so much more to her from childhood to growing up, and also Elizabeth as well. So obviously when she died, Elizabeth, her other half sister, Elizabeth I, she was the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. So she had, very powerful parents. She took over, and of course she tried to steer the country back to Protestant. So it was a real swing all the time with whoever took over, from Catholicism to Protestant, Catholicism to Protestant. It was like a pendulum the whole time, depending on who was in power. Absolutely crazy.
It is crazy stuff, and I mean, Elizabeth, she was kind of like in the same boat as, Mary had been, because, Mary, as we say, Mary had watched her father disregard their mother, kick her out, kind of thing. And so Elizabeth, she'd watched her father, the same guy, basically murder her mother.
Yeah, I know, terrible. Terrible.
There wasn't really a great track record there.
No.
As far as Henry was concerned,
No, I know. Terrible. So,
and I mean, Elizabeth the first, I think she was one of the longest reigning monarchs.
She was indeed. She was very, very popular, wasn't she? And she did last a long time. But like I said, I haven't looked up too much about them because I want to research those for one, because, you know, we can do a whole session on Mary and we could do a whole session on Elizabeth, because of course when Elizabeth took over ruling, it became the Elizabethan times. We kind of left the Tudor times behind, didn't we? So it was almost like Mary was the last of the line of Tudors.
The last of the Tudor dynasty, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds a bit. That sounds a bit more posh. I'm quite red now, Anna. I look like a big strawberry now.
You do look red.
I just noticed that in the camera. Jesus. Before we came on.
I look a bit suntanned, actually, and I think it's just the light.
You do. Well, you're down south. You know, you always get the sun first.
It's been 22 degrees here today. It's been really warm here today. It's been lovely.
It was a wee bit milder here today. Yeah, over the weekend it was really warm, and the temperatures to ramp up in the next few days. But
I think it's going to go down a bit tomorrow.
Shorts have been on. It can't last. We're not that lucky. But I mean, as you see, you know, Elizabeth comes along and it becomes Elizabethan times.
Yeah.
And that's basically the Tudor era over and done with.
I know, I feel so sad about it because we've talked about all the key characters, haven't we? And Henry VIII is, although he was quite brutal, there's something quite magical about him that historians or whoever researches him, they just want to keep him alive and talk about him the whole time. He's the most researched and talked about monarch, isn't he? And the fact that he had 3 offsprings that all became king or queens, all with very different values and very different reasons. It's a fascinating era. It really is.
I totally agree. It is, you know, I mean, he died in 1547. I'm trying to do the math. My maths is correct. You work in a school, so you should be able to do that. 1547. No, so 500 years ago, something like that. I don't know. My maths is rubbish. And he's still widely talked about today. Okay, fair enough. You know, a lot of the other monarchs are talked about. You know, Charles I. You know, I was going to say Lady Victoria, Queen Victoria. You know, Queen Elizabeth II. God rest them all. But Henry VIII just seems to have this stance in history.
He does. And it was such an interesting religious and political time. And it was such a huge thing. The Reformation, when he broke away from the Catholic Church, was such, if you think how huge that was at the time, when divorce wasn't recognised. So the only way that he could divorce Catherine of Aragon so he could be with Anne Boleyn was to break away from the church altogether because he didn't have the Pope's backing. I mean, that was huge. And I think that's what he will be remembered for, not only all of his wives, his 6 wives, but for the Reformation and what happened with the church, because it was just on a massive scale, you know, and it did shape the way forward, because as I said, it then kept swapping from Catholicism, you know, to Protestant. It was swinging to and fro depending on what child wanted what religion in, wasn't it, really? And they all had their own reasons why they wanted the religion, especially Mary I, because obviously Catherine of Aragon was Henry VIII's first wife. And like I said, she died of heartbreak because of how Henry treated her. So Mary wanted to avenge her mother. So she was really brutal, really, really brutal. And she couldn't wait to get her hands on that crown so that she could be the queen that she felt she rightfully should be. So
and she would have picked up bits and pieces down through the years.
Yeah.
You know, different, you know, whoever was on the throne at the time, she would have picked up wee bits and pieces of advice, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, just get back, you know, I think that's why Henry's remembered so much, because of the break for the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because religion, all right, still big today, you know, but back then it was everybody's way of life.
Yeah.
You know, it played a major part in everybody's life, no matter.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about his 3 children as well, they were all, not so much the young lads, Edward VI, because he wouldn't have really been aware so much, but Elizabeth and Mary were really wary of each other. And when Mary was on the throne, I mean, she arrested Elizabeth and had her locked away because she was worried that she would try and come and take over. They were also paranoid of each other back in that day, even their own siblings. You know, it was a really difficult time to live, wasn't it? Because if you didn't conform, you'd lose your head, or if you had a certain religion, you could be burnt at the stake. I mean, it was just an horrific time. And I think that's also why in history, it's a really important era, isn't it? People like to talk about it because it's so brutal, but so fascinating. It kind of captures your imagination, captures your attention. It's, yeah, I mean, we could talk about it forever, couldn't we, really?
We could, I mean, as you say, it was such a horrific time, and even members of the Privy Council, my wires caught my chair again. This happened last night, I know. Happens quite a wee bit. My headphone wire sneaks down between the arm and the cushion, and you go to move your head.
You're going to be talking like that in a minute. You're going to be like that.
I keep moving it, I know, but it's I don't know. It's got a big attraction for the arm of my chair. What was I saying? What was I going to say? I'm going to say something. What was it?
About his Privy Council, the other members of the Privy Council that we talked about previously.
I mean, even members of the Privy Council weren't safe. You know, as we know, Cromwell, Thomas More. You know, and it must have been horrific getting up in the morning, no knowing if that day was going to be your last or no. Because let's face it, there was a few cases that, you know, Henry would take a dislike to somebody, and that was it. He was off to the scaffold for whatever reason. It could be the slightest thing.
And if somebody had more power, as in Henry thought slightly more of them, even if it wasn't truthful and they were whispering in his ear, he would have somebody executed on their word, and they could have been a good person. Well, we know some of them were good people, you know, so it was really such a dangerous time to live. And if you were invited into Henry's court, you must have been very nervous to even try and get close to him, whether you were one of his wives, one of his Privy Council. It must have been, you know, you almost probably wanted to hide away in the corner so that you weren't chosen to be one of his advisors. It must have been a really scary time for people, mustn't it?
And the fact, I mean, you really take Thomas More, for instance. He was a lifelong friend of Henry.
Yeah.
You know, and I think he was also friend with Henry's father, Henry VII. And Henry had him executed simply because he wouldn't sign a bit of paper. Yeah,
I know. It's so sad, isn't it? And also Cardinal Wolsey. We spoke a lot about him previously in previous episodes. And, you know, although we don't really know how he died, he was shunned from court. And I think that kind of broke his heart, didn't it? Because he had been very close to Henry's father, Henry VII, and also to Henry himself. And then Henry turned on him because he couldn't help, or he didn't want to help, break away from the Catholic Church. You know, it put him in a very difficult position. So he was shunned from court. And that was another very powerful person who probably thought that, you know, they were well in with the king because of the family connections from going back to his father. And, you know, Cardinal Wolsey supporting his father and also helping Henry VIII because he was so much older and wiser than him. So there are so many key figures around Henry who, if you watch any dramas about them, any films about them, you really get to know what the character might have been like, what they looked like, how they acted, and you sort of really gravitate towards some of them. And it's so sad to see that Henry turned against them, and they, you know, they were accused of treason, they were sent away, and it just happened so many times. But as you said, even after Henry died, it still did. There were still beheadings, there were still people being burnt at the stake. It was just a really brutal time, wasn't it? So,
do you think? Sorry, I mean, everybody says his attitude kind of changed after the jousting accident in 1536. But I think, just my opinion, that he actually started changing before then. You know, I mean, when he was first put in the throne when he was 18. You know,
he was very young, wasn't he, himself?
And he always said, "I'm going to be a just and fair king," you know, etc., etc. couple of weeks later, he had two of his father's closest friends executed. I think that was just to show, you know, I'm the king now, I'm in charge.
Yeah.
But, you know, you take into account everything that happened leading up to the jousting accident. I think he started to change prior to that.
Yeah.
You know, he started to become more ruthless and what have you. And then the jousting accident just gave him a wee push.
There's something quite interesting as well, that there is also another theory that we could think about. There's a possibility he could have been schizophrenic, Henry VIII, because he could be so kind and so loving and so fun, but then he could be really brutal and fly into rages. And this is before his accident as well. So maybe we're blaming his accident for changing his personality, but perhaps he could have had a split personality. He could have been schizophrenic. None of those were diagnosed back then because they didn't really exist back then as we know them now. But he could have had that kind of split personality, couldn't he? Because whenever you see him portrayed, there are always two sides to him. And one side is very endearing, isn't it? Where women would really, when he was younger and attractive, women would wound and fall for him. But then there was this really scary, brutal side of him. So whether that was always part of his personality.
That's actually a good point, because as you say, there was a lot of conditions back then that weren't recognised, they weren't known about, you know.
Exactly.
Basically, I mean, I'm going to get a reference to Pendle again. You know, look at John Law, the peddler for Pendle. You know, everybody thought he'd been cursed by little Alice, but it turned out, you know, going by the story back then, he had a stroke. Which obviously people back then wouldn't have a clue what stroke was. So, there is a really good chance that he may have been schizophrenic.
Yeah.
And obviously this wasn't a thing back then, even though it did exist.
No, it would have just been their personality, wouldn't it? But, you know, it's an interesting thought when you think about the things that he did, because with his wives, he was very loving with them. I mean, he was with Catherine of Aragon, as we know, for a very long time, and they were a very loving, strong couple. What went against her is that she couldn't produce a male heir for him. But then he truly fell in love with Anne Boleyn. I mean, you can see letters between Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and it was a true love story. But then he beheaded her. So there's that split again, isn't there, where everything's all hunky-dory, great, and then suddenly... So
everything's great on a Sunday, but on the Monday, he just wants rid of her.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's, you know, basically, I know it happened over more than just a day, but that's you know, he loved this woman so much, but then he sends her to the scaffold.
Yeah, exactly. So from a paranormal point of view, Scott, what would you say about the hauntings around the Tudor era? I mean, do you know of any hauntings of Henry VIII? Or obviously we know of some of his wives, don't we, his past wives?
Well, you know, you've got Anne Boleyn, who's said to be seen at numerous locations, you know, like the Tower, Hampton Court, Hever Castle, Salisbury Hall, places like that. She's said to be there. Jane Seymour is said to have been spotted on the Starlight Staircase in Hampton Court Palace, which led up to Edward's bedroom on the anniversary of Edward's death. So that's kind of an anniversary haunting. There was, as I said before we came on, there was the CCTV footage taken at Hampton Court of the doors swinging open, this figure.
Yeah.
But that was later showed to be a hoax, basically. I might be wrong, but to my knowledge, there's very, very little. I mean, Catherine of Aragon supported to be seen around where she was born and brought up. But I say Anna Cleves. Oh, I'm forgetting Catherine Howard in the Great Gallery.
Of course. Famous one, isn't it? Her screaming.
She's been reported. Catherine Parr, nothing. Anna Cleves, not. Henry himself, even Edward, you know.
I know, it's
Elizabeth.
strange. You think with Henry VIII, with everything that happened, that there would be more reported sightings or hauntings, but maybe, you know, we briefly discussed this before, didn't we? But maybe because he had it quite hard. People think he was very privileged because he was rich, you know, he had a kingdom. However, he had quite a tough life with everything that happened with the religion, politics, his marriages. So maybe he was just done with this world. He doesn't even want to come back and haunt it, or, you know, be a ghost here. He's just done. He's moved on, you know. It's interesting.
That's really, you know, that's what I spoke to Mark Egerton about this, especially about Anne Boleyn, you know, because she seems to be the most famous one, haunting-wise. But what Mark and I were saying was, you know, you've got, she's supported 7 or 8 different locations, maybe more. But people, you know, people go to these locations and they might see an apparition of a woman, and they immediately think it's Anne Boleyn because she had ties to, you know, that particular place. But it could be an apparition of somebody else that used to, you know, a lady used to live there, or a servant, whatever.
Exactly.
People just automatically think, oh, well, that's a woman. Anne Boleyn lived here. That's Anne Boleyn.
And interestingly, you know, we've talked about the wives in detail before, and Anne Boleyn was possibly one of the most popular of his wives because she had character and she was feisty. So maybe people want to believe that it is her that's haunting because she was such an interesting character. But again, why would she want to come back? She didn't have a great life here. She lost her head. She was treated terribly by Henry, wasn't she? You think he left Catherine of Aragon, he caused the whole Reformation, left the Catholic Church to be with Anne Boleyn, only for a couple of years to then behead her. I mean, that's what beggars belief, isn't it? It really just, it's,
3 years. 3 years between them getting married and her being executed, which isn't a long time, you know, 36 months. See, I can do maths. 36 months. Which really isn't a long time considering what he went through to actually, you know, get his annulment and then get his marriage. And the thing is, how quickly he remarried. When he married Jane Seymour on the day that Anne Boleyn was executed.
I know, they were getting married, weren't they, while she was being beheaded, or just after she was beheaded? I mean,
you know, the same day, you know, Anne's at the Tower getting, and he's elsewhere getting married. And you think, what the hell? But haunting-wise, it's, you know, even though I'd say it's the most famous era in British history, no offence to all the other kings, queens, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, there really is very, very little, except Anne Boleyn, you know, Catherine Howard, Jane's occasional sighting on the staircase. That's it. Henry, he's, you know, that's not to say they're no about.
No, that's, you know, we don't know, do we, for sure? We'll never truly know, will we?
That's not to say they're not still kicking about. I would. It's an era, period in history that I'd love to get back to.
Yeah, wouldn't it be fascinating to time travel and go step back in there? But it, you know, kind of almost as the Invisible Man, because you wouldn't want to be seen by him and dragged into his, you know, his court, his politics.
Aye, exactly. You know, you'd like to get back, but just stay in the background, just be a baker or something like that. You know, somebody, you know, just be a farmhand or something like that.
Exactly. But I just wanted to say, going back to Henry, do you not feel also that he was quite vulnerable? Because when you think of the different wives that he had and the different characters that they were, and people could just talk to him and say, oh, this wife would be good for you, or this person would be good for you. And he was kind of manipulated quite a lot, wasn't he? So there was almost, despite his brutality, there was also a vulnerability about him. There must have been, because he was manipulated by so many people, and he went through his 6 wives because he was manipulated by these people. So that shows that he was actually quite vulnerable, I think, as well. He wasn't just that brutish king that we think about. There was a vulnerability there, definitely.
Well, here's a question for you. Do you think maybe that's because, as we said earlier on, he was never meant to be king? You know, it was always Arthur. And then
quite possibly. Quite possibly.
He's shoved into the limelight. He's not had the same kind of preparation.
Yeah.
You know, because he's all been rushed, what have you. And so he's not the same kind of, I don't know, training, for want of a better word.
Yeah. No, you're
because we
right.
do know that Henry VII and Arthur were very, very close. Whereas, you know, with young Henry, he was shunted off somewhere else. And then, so maybe it's because he never had that closeness to his father. And I'm using the word training, for want of a better word.
Yeah, quite
Arthur
possibly.
had, you know, and I mean, let's face it, Anna Cleves, he married her just for going on a, he'd never met her.
I know.
He went with a wee portrait, you know. And then there is the famous line when he turns around and says to his council, I've not been handled well.
Yeah.
You know, and I think after Anne Boleyn was executed, because, you know, leading up to it, he's listening to everybody in his head, basically, you know, she's guilty, she's a witch, incest, blah, 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 you name it. I think after it, he felt so guilty because he's had time to reflect. And even though he got married to Jane Seymour on the same day, he's had time to think back and think, I got that wrong.
Yeah.
I listened to all these other people when I should have listened to myself.
Yeah.
So he was, to me, he was quite vulnerable that way.
Yeah. And he didn't have a chance to listen to his own thoughts, did he? Because he was surrounded by people constantly talking at him, talking to him, manipulating him. So, yeah, it's you know, and when you think of the death, we're talking about the death of Henry, that must have been a huge loss to so many people, but a huge relief to others. It's kind of mixed feelings. It must have been, mustn't it, to think they've lost this king who was so brutal, but there were people that were still very fond of him that had lost that such a powerful, unique king. I mean, it must have been really peculiar when he died for the people that were close to him, the people that were around him. It must have been a huge, huge loss. But for some, they may have been glad that he'd gone because, you know, they felt safer.
Definitely, though, you know, there would be those that, you know, they felt, all right, well, I'm safe, my neck's safe, you know. But as you say, I mean, he reigned for 38 years, you know, and it wasn't all, but, you know, he's made out to be a tyrant a lot of the time, but it wasn't all bad. So he would have had people, you know, in his privy council, you know, even normal people outside the court that would have felt sorry, you know, they were sad by he was lost. But no, I think there would have been a big sigh of relief when he passed away. But then I think it would have been a big sigh of relief, but then there would have been the doubt, as in, right, well, what's coming next?
Yeah.
You know, because people would have known about Mary, Elizabeth, you know.
Yeah. And people still lost their heads because of them, didn't they? And got burnt at the stake. So was it any better?
Didn't they? The execution, I mean, Henry's said to have been responsible for 72,000 executions over 38 years.
Yeah.
You know, 72,000 people executed.
I know.
In 38-year reign.
Yeah.
So people would have been wondering, you know, who's going to take over now? It's maybe losing the Prime Minister. You know, a lot of folk hate the Prime. I'm not getting into politics, I don't tell you, David, but, you know, they get rid of one Prime Minister, think, all right, who are we going to get next?
Yeah.
You know, we're going to get another cabbage.
You always have hope for something fresh, and then do they do anything any different? You know, it's the same, isn't it?
So, I mean, back then, you know, our Prime Minister would have been the same as the King and Queen. You know, because they basically ruled the country. Whereas the Prime Minister, you know, he's the head of government. As Henry was the head of government. All right, you had Parliament, but what Henry said went. You know, so I think it's just kind of the same kind of scenario.
Yeah.
You know, it's but no, he's one. I've always been fascinated with the Tudor era.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, me too.
I've always had a pull towards the Tudors.
Yeah.
And
And we didn't know that about each other, did we?
No, we never.
That. We were introduced to do sort of a chat show together, you know, to talk about paranormal and tarot, whatever. But we didn't then realise that we'd got that connection, and we kind of both mentioned it, didn't we? And we're like, wow, how amazing is that? So we've done this series.
We've got Barry John to thank for that.
We have, absolutely.
I was talking to Barry earlier on. He's coming on with Tayami next month.
Oh,
he's
lovely.
Doing a show with Tayami.
Oh, good.
So I was talking to him maybe about an hour or something before before we kicked off the night.
Yeah.
I've had him on for a while, but I'm waiting just to see how he was doing. See, he's doing quite well.
Good. Yeah, I keep
think
in
it's
touch
the
quite a lot.
18th. I think it's the 18th of May he's on.
Okay, good.
Aye, so you'll need to make sure you're watching.
I'll be watching, don't you worry.
You need to make sure you're watching, but I think we'll wind it up there. Have we got anything else to add, though?
I don't think so. I just feel quite bereft that we finished talking about Henry, because he's such a huge historical figure who I love, actually. So it's quite sad, but we have still got, you know, Mary to talk about and Elizabeth to talk about, because they deserve their whole own slot, really, because they're, you know, they had quite interesting, turbulent lives even before they took over the crown. So yeah, we'll talk about those at some point, no doubt.
And don't forget Mary Queen of Scots. Sarah's wanting to join us with that one.
Yes, I know, absolutely.
Sarah's wanting to come on. She's our Mary Queen of Scots woman. Have you watched Reign?
I haven't, no. I know about it, but I haven't watched it yet.
It's really, really good.
Yeah,
we watched it over a few times. We went to see, it's quite fun, we went to see the film Mary Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
A couple of years back, whenever it came out, I don't know, but we'd been dying to see it, you know, because Mary Queen of Scots, dying to see this, but we'd went for dinner first, and we actually fell asleep.
Oh no!
Because it's like 2.5, 3 hours long, and so when we go to the cinema, Sarah always likes to get the big, you know, the big comfy seats.
Oh yeah.
You know,
they
the one you pay
recline.
through the
The lights go out.
Aye. So, and there was this woman next to us that actually woke us up. It's the film finished.
Is that because you were snoring too loud?
But the two is actually called to it, you know, which is, you know, I do apologise to the people who made it. We watched it again, but we watched it again at home. And it was a really good film. But so Sarah's wanting to do that because she's quite the expert on Mary.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's her passion. So we're still got that to come. I mean, but I think we'll wind it up there. I'll keep you just for a wee second after we come off. So where can people find you for your tarot cards?
So they can find me on Facebook, Tarot Tracey. So yeah, I do my tarot card readings, as Scott will know. I also run a development group. So if anybody is interested in developing spiritually, paranormally, or otherwise, you can contact me. But what I'm really passionate about at the moment is my past life regression. So if you did a past life regression session with me, you never know, you might go back to the Tudor era. Wouldn't that be amazing if that was one of your past lives? Not necessarily if you lost your head or were burnt at the stake, but it might be quite interesting. But yeah.
I'm going to answer this question with Pierre. If you go to our YouTube channel, they are all in order, but they are, just scroll right back. They are all in order, but they're a bit spaced out because Tracy's schedule's quite erratic, and you know, trying to get a hold of the women at times, it's impossible. You know, and there's nothing regular with her, you know. But they are all on.
Yeah, they're on there, aren't they? I can't remember when we first started them. It's over a year ago. So if you scroll right back to kind of December 25, I think maybe we did our first one, and then you can work your way through the series.
I can't. But they are all there, young sir. I'm glad you enjoyed tonight. Past life regression, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to do it or not.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, some people believe in it, some people don't. It works for some people, it doesn't work for some people. I would say you need to be able to relax and to go into sort of a gentle hypnotic state. And you need to be open-minded because you never know what happens, you know. And I sometimes ask people before I regress them, is there an era in you know, history that you're interested in? Are there any things that you dream about? Are there any things that you collect? And 9 times out of 10, whatever they've told me, they won't go back there. They'll go somewhere totally different. It's always somewhere different, which fascinates me. I mean, I'm obviously taking them under, and then I ask them certain questions, but they're giving me all the information. I'm not feeding anything. And also because they are under a light hypnotic state, they remember everything, so they can come back and remember that. And it's fascinating. I love taking people on that journey because it's absolutely fascinating for me. So yeah.
I'll have a wee think about it.
Yeah, give it a go. You never know.
I'll know. That rhymes actually. Give it a go, you'll never know.
No, exactly.
I don't know. I'll obviously we talk quite a bit, so I will give it a bit of thought and get back to you with an executive decision.
Okay,
That's
sir.
it. I was trying to sound posh there, did that? I don't know if that worked.
You went a little bit English then.
I can do English, love. I can do an English accent. It's not very good, love, you know, but I can do a little bit of an English accent when I want. You know, sun's out, shining today. It was pure banging. You know. No.
Was that a Scottish English accent?
No, that was English. That proper English, love. That proper down south the border, back Carolina, you know. My Scottish accent's crap.
I know. Well, as you know, I used to live in Dundee, so I can acclimatise to your accent. Some people find your accent quite strong, but I got used to tuning in when I was living with all those Dundonians. So I got, I can tune into your accent. It's not too bad.
No, most people can understand us. Most people can understand me, but I can understand myself. So I'm quite happy as long as I can understand myself.
Thing, isn't it? That's the important thing.
Then I get by, But no, a lot of people think we're all savages and stuff because of our accent. We're all big hard men, and we eat with our fingers, off the lettuce leaves and that and stuff like that. We're quite civilized,
Yeah, you're not.
No, we're past the barbaric stage, We don't go out killing our food in the field every afternoon and hanging it up to dry and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? We do go to supermarkets. But we shall wind it up there, folks. So go and give Tracey a look up on her Facebook page.
Yeah,
you won't be disappointed. She is quite good at the tarot. She's teaching her 10-year-old daughter. She's her 10-year-old. So Tracey is her tutor, and she's doing
well.
quite well.
She's doing really well. She's a good student.
All Glaswegians are softies inside. I'm the son of a canvas line. Canvas line doesn't count as Glasgow, Craig. Take it from me. Canvas line's kind of out the way. Canvas line is kind of like over that way,
Yeah.
Right, no in Glasgow. Lovely people in Canvas line. Don't get me wrong. I used to go to college there many moons ago, but that's kind of away out there. You know what I mean?
You can beat them up to break.
Aye. If he can catch me, I've got a car. He's no. No, I mean, good luck. Thank you very much, Craig. So give this lady a look up. She is very interesting, and we shall be back with our next instalment.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at Mary and Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I'll keep a hold of you for a wee second there. So that's us for tonight. I'm back on tomorrow. That'll be 3 shows in a row. I'm back on tomorrow night with historian and author and investigator Hannah Richards. Hannah Richards. Hannah was on a few weeks ago, and we're going to pick up tomorrow night when we left off. She wrote a couple of books and she's on TikTok under Hannah Haunts. You should get a TikTok channel actually there.
I need Sarah. She's the IT expert. I'm no good with IT. I'm on Facebook. I went onto Instagram briefly and didn't know what the heck I was doing. So yeah, I need a bit of tuition on Instagram, TikTok, all these things. I don't know what I'm doing. Well, I'll talk to Sarah.
Just give Sarah a wee mail or a wee video call.
Yeah,
and then Sarah will be able to get you set up in the technicalities of the TikTok.
That would be good.
You know what I mean? So we're going to wind up here, folks. We'll see you tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, and you'll see this young lady very soon as well. So thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your evening. All right, just cheers. Bye.